Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Wildcard Weekend, ladies and gentlemen. This is the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon. I hope everyone's having a lovely, lovely weekend as we get started what's going to be a fantastic football weekend. It's crazy. We've made it. We're officially through the regular season, and here we are entering week 1 of the playoffs. It's wildcard weekend, and it's a special, historic wildcard weekend. Why is that? Because it's the first time ever we're going to have 6 total games. Usually we just get 4 games, right? Because usually there's only 6 teams that make the playoffs. You have 2 teams on byes, so that means you have 4 teams from each conference. Equals 4 games. But with the NFL doing an awesome job of adding that 7th team for each division. And remember, this is not a COVID thing. This is a thing from here on out. So from here on out, we will always have 7 playoff teams, and we will always have 1 bye. So you get that home field advantage. You get that first that first overall seed from the NFC and AFC, and you're locked up moving forward. In this instance, it's the Green Bay Packers for the NFC and the Kansas City Chiefs for the AFC. So those 2 teams are sitting at home, they're chilling, and they're watching to see who their opponents might be. In terms of the roundup, the slate that we have today, we've got a good one. We really do. We've got 3 games today, Saturday, and 3 games on Sunday. The first 3 games today starting at 1 o'clock, so get up, get ready to go. I'm doing this early so I can get this out to you guys so you guys can, have it in front of you to listen to before the games start or able to listen to it throughout the weekend. Also, just for my own selfish personal reasons, I want to be able to finish this so I can sit down, grab some beers, relax, grab some pizza, watch the games. Really excited about that, but this 1 o'clock game really might be one of the most entertaining games of the weekend. We got the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Buffalo Bills, all right? Look, Buffalo is, if not the hottest team in the NFL right now, they're one of the hottest teams. You can argue Green Bay's up there, but Green Bay and Buffalo, those 2 are the hottest teams in the NFL right now. The Indianapolis Colts, they're squeaking in at a 7 seed. When have you heard an 11-5 football team having to squeak in? So remember, just because the Colts are a 7 seed, this is no slouch of a team. This is an 11-win football team with a really good defense and a really good head coach in Frank Wright, who is going back to Buffalo, where he used to be a quarterback back in his playing days. So that's the 1 o'clock game. Then the 4:40 game. And remember, we're going to break all of this down, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just giving you guys a little rundown of what we have coming up this weekend on the slate. Then we'll talk about everything in more detail. The 4:40 game, we've got a divisional round, a wild card round between 2 division teams is a better way to say it. The Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the big question into this game is, will Jared Goff play? We do not know, right? Sean McVay, he's kept it up in the air all weekend. He's kind of just made jokes about that question whenever it comes to us. He kind of just like acted like he, at one point a reporter asked him it, he acted like he didn't hear it, and he just stood there in silence and then started laughing and walked away. So he's trying to have some fun with it. He's not trying to be rude to the media, but I think he's honestly just telling you the truth. He doesn't know. I think it's going to be a game time decision. All reports are coming out that Seattle has been preparing for Jared Goff. They believe Jared Goff is going to give it a go, and they've been preparing for Jared Goff. I honestly think, remember, if Jared Goff doesn't go, it'll be backup quarterback John Wolford out of Wake Forest. John Wolford, he made his first NFL start last week where he was able to beat the Arizona Cardinals. Now, look, that game was a low-scoring game. It had a lot to do with the defense, and also Kyler Murray was hurt leading up to that game. He then got hurt right at the start of that game. So, yes, they got the win, but that had a lot to do with the defense. Whether Jared Goff or John Wolford is playing this game, it's going to have to do with the defense again. I'm telling you that right now. This is going to be a low-scoring game. The Seahawks offense has not been the best as of late, and their defense has been much better as of late. The Rams offense has not been the best as of late, and their defense has been the absolute best in the league as of late. So moving into this game, it is going to be a slow-moving defensive battle where if your defense can get you points somehow, whether that's off of turnovers, whether that's off of special teams, whether that's off of getting turnovers and putting your offense in a close range position where all they have to do is get a first down and get a field goal, or get a first down and you end up getting a touchdown. That's what's going to decide this ball game. Turnovers. Which offense can protect the ball, take the sack, or throw it out of bounds and punt the ball away. It's going to be one of those slow-moving, very low-scoring type games. I like the Rams defense a lot. I'm not telling you that's who I think is going to win. I'm saving my predictions for later. We'll get to those. But I'm just telling you this. In the playoffs, when you get a team that has a better defense, usually I like to favor that team because everything slows down in the playoffs. In the regular season, we're all about offense, we're all about stats, fantasy football, betting, all of that stuff. I get that. Things change in the playoffs. Things get tight. There's a lot of pressure on the line. It's cold out. The running game and the defense means so much more. So something to look at when it comes to that game. The night game, the nightcap, to cap off this 3-game Saturday wildcard weekend, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to the Washington football team. That's right, an 11-5 Tampa team will be going on the road to take on a 7-9 Washington team. That's going to also be a very interesting battle. A lot of people, when they look at this game, they say this: Tom Brady and the Buccaneers should absolutely dominate Washington. I would say, as our great Lee Corso on ESPN says, not so fast. Not so fast, okay? What is the one thing that has always affected Tom Brady in his career? Pressure. It's not pressure with the blitz, because if you blitz him, he'll tear you apart in the secondary all day. It's pressure with your 4-man front. If your guys up front can get pressure and destroy the Bucs offensive line, you can beat Tampa Bay. And Washington might have the best front four in the entire NFL. That is what I'm going to be watching. I still favor Tampa Bay in this game, but that is something to watch. Then on Sunday, we've got arguably the best game of the weekend, starting off at 1 o'clock on ESPN, Baltimore Ravens against the Tennessee Titans. Both are an 11-5 teams, and these two teams have kind of formed somewhat of a rivalry. There's a lot of bad blood between these two teams. Remember last year, the Ravens go 14-2. What happens? They welcome the 6th seed, the Titans. They get on a hot streak. They run into the playoffs at the very last weekend. They win to get in. They beat the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. That kind of ends their dynasty in the wild card round. And then they go into Baltimore, a 14-2 team. The MVP Lamar Jackson having one of the best quarterback years we've seen in the history of the NFL. and they go into Baltimore and straight hit them in the mouth. They destroy Baltimore. Then this year, they go to Baltimore during the pregame. They're dancing on the logo. Baltimore Ravens head coach John Harbaugh comes out, kind of gets in their face, starts talking trash to the players. There's a little bit of a skirmish happening in the middle of the field. Like, these two teams have blood. The Titans, as we remember, they go on to win that game in overtime. So the Titans right now are 2-0 in the last two games against the Ravens. It's been tough game one. They just blew them out. The other one was a tough overtime game. But there's been a lot of heated, animosity in this game. And I cannot wait to see how these two teams really just play each other. For lack of a better term, I'm just going to sit there and watch all of the things, the extra stuff, obviously the play, but the trash talking on the sides. How do both quarterbacks play? And most importantly, can the Ravens finally get over the hump, beat the Titans, and get Lamar Jackson his first win of the season? This is a big, big moment for Lamar. We're going to get more into this game, and we're going to get more into overall which quarterback, out of all these teams playing, which quarterback has the most pressure heading into this weekend. And we're going to dive into that. That will be something we'll do in the coming segments here, so stay tuned for that. And then the 4:40 game, probably a lot of people would say the most boring, the easiest predict game of the weekend. You've got the Chicago Bears, 8-8 Chicago Bears. Mitch Trubisky came on as of late, really kind of gave a spark to this offense. So did David Montgomery, taking on the New Orleans Saints. It does seem that the Saints will have Kamara back, who had COVID last week, and Michael Thomas, who's been on IR the last 3 weeks. It looks like he'll be back as well. The Saints are favored by 10. The Saints should win this game with ease. I don't know if they will. Remember, the Saints have lost three in a row now at home playoff games. They lost to the Vikings last year. They lost to the Rams before that. So they're looking to kind of change that stigma, win a game against, let's be honest. Look, I don't mean to disrespect the Bears, but out of all the teams in the playoffs, the Bears are probably the worst team. They slipped in. They had a great early half of their season. Then they really, really struggled. They were able to turn it on as of late. They slipped in as that final 7th seed because Arizona wasn't able to get it done and win last weekend. Can they pull off a miracle? Of course they can. It's the NFL, but it will be very tough. Then to end out the wild card weekend, we've got another division battle for wild card Sunday night. Cleveland Browns heading to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's no secret that the Steelers have been the big brother of this battle. They've dominated the Browns for years on years, and the Browns did get a win over the Steelers last week, but that was with Mason Rudolph, and they only won by 2 points. Now, everybody knows what's happening with the Browns this week. Their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, who was my vote for coach of the year, by the way, he's done an awesome job with that franchise. He tested positive for COVID, so he will not be able to coach this Browns team. They have a lot of other players that have and coaches that have tested positive. All week, they haven't really been able to practice. And look, they have an uphill battle. There's no doubt about it, right? Even though the Steelers haven't been playing great football as of late, when you lose your head coach, when you lose players and all that stuff, they have an uphill battle. What I do love about the Browns is the way they're going about this. The way they're kind of like Baker Mayfield, he didn't make an excuse this week for the media. He said, there's no excuse. We still should go win this game. I loved how he didn't, they have every single right, honestly. They have every single chance this week to kind of come out and say, yeah, we made the playoffs for the first time since 2002. That right there is a success in itself. We have our head coach who's been our leader. He's out. A lot of other players are out. We haven't been able to practice all week. So we're really just happy to be here. We'll see what happens in the game on Sunday, but we're really just happy to be here and make the playoffs. They easily could have came out and said that, but they didn't. Baker stood up and he said, no, we still expect to win the football game. And part of me really respects that, because no one would have gotten on him for saying, I mean, it's true. You lose your head coach who has really, again, if he's not the coach of the year, he's runner-up. I mean, what he's done for this Cleveland team in the matter of one season, what he's done for Baker Mayfield in his career, he's completely changed the trajectory of his career in one season. They could have said, look, we don't have our leader. We don't have our guy. We also don't have other players. Other coaches are out. The guy that's filling in for head coach, he's never actually been a head coach before, and now he's got to do it his first time ever in a playoff game. They easily could have used those excuses and rolled with them. But Baker Mayfield didn't allow that to happen, and I'm sure his team really expected that, and they're going to bring the fire. Look, they're going to give it all they have. And if this was any other team they were playing, I would say maybe they have a shot. And we'll get into this more, but because it's the Steelers, because it's Mike Tomlin, because it's Big Ben, they just know how to beat the Browns. They do, and I get it. This is a different Browns team and all of that stuff. And again, anything can happen. It's the playoffs. But the Steelers have the better defense, they have the better offense, and they have the better coach. When you put those three together, usually that team's going to win. Now, I say usually because we've seen it not happen that way before. And if Big Ben plays anything he has over the second half of the season, then the Browns are live underdogs, which means, for those that don't understand that means they are 100% in it for a chance to win. They really can. But if Big Ben plays like he did in the first 8, 9, 10 games of the season, then the Steelers will run away with this game and they will move on to take on, we'll see. If the Bills win, they'll be playing the Bills. If not, they'll be playing someone else. So that is my thought. That's just kind of a quick summary of the 6 games here. Again, we are going to dive into all of this much, much deeper as we go here. But all in all, really, really like what we're seeing. This is going to be a fun matchup for each and every game. Really, if you look at each and every game, you can point to all these games here, and you can point to one thing that's going to excite you the most. Every game has a big storyline, right? I mean, if you just go down and look at it, the Bills, Josh Allen, finally, putting together a Buffalo team that has this fan base so excited. Sean McDermott, what he's done with this organization, what Brian Dable, the offensive coordinator, has done for Josh Allen himself, a 50% completion guy in college. You usually don't see those guys come into the NFL and have success. What does he do? 50% in college, 50% his first year. Moves up a little bit to like 60%. Now he's completing almost 70% of his passes because he put in the work. He worked hard. They made a great trade for Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley's been awesome. Isaiah McKenzie, all of these moves, John Brown that they've made, it's all worked out. It's all worked out. Credit to Brandon Beane, credit to Sean McDermott, and credit to Josh Allen for putting in the work. And that's pretty awesome to see, right? But then it's like, okay, they went 13-3. Now they're moving from, should we have expectations to just make the playoffs? Or now, wait, we went 13-3. We went 7-1 at home. We should win. We should win a playoff game. Shoot, we should win 2 playoff games. We should be right up there with the Chiefs, facing off against them in the AFC Championship game in 2 weeks. That's the thought process. But then, on the other hand, you've got the 11-5 Colts. Phillip Rivers, this is supposed to be his last year. Is he really going to retire after this? If so, wouldn't it be awesome to go out with a Super Bowl win? They've got the team for it. Look, their defense is one of the best defenses in the league. Their offensive line is the best offensive line in the league. Jonathan Taylor, he was a hyped-up rookie coming into it, but boy, has he succeeded those expectations, especially in these last 5 weeks. Running wild, he has now finished third out of all the running backs in yards this season. You got Derrick Henry 1, who reached 2,000 yards. Awesome job to him. You got Dalvin Cook 2, and you have the rookie Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin at number 3. So a very stacked Colts team. that really should not be the 7th seed in the playoffs. Unfortunate for the Bills, they are. I'll tell you this right now. I think Buffalo's going to win the game, but I already bet the Colts +7. I think the Colts make this a very close, entertaining game, and watch out. Because if they can get an early lead, and Josh Allen, yes, even though he's had an MVP-level season, it's still going to be his second playoff game ever, where you have the experienced Phillip Rivers over there. If they can get a lead early, kind of get in Buffalo's head a little bit, they could possibly win this game. When you look at that game, when you look at the Rams and the Seahawks, the Bucs in Washington, a huge storyline, Tom Brady finally in the playoffs on his own. Without Bill Belichick, it's just him. Can he keep, Belichick and the Patriots, they had a bad season. Tom Brady and the Bucs, they went 11-5. So that whole thought process of who's better, Brady's winning that debate right now, right? Looks like who was more important to the dynasty over the last 10, 20 years to the Patriots? Brady's winning that. Can he keep that debate going? Can he keep his side rolling by winning a playoff game? If he loses, he comes back down to earth a little bit. You start to look at them more even. All of this, there's so much at stake for these players and these teams, and it's just going to be a fantastic wild card weekend. So, what are we going to do on the show here today? I wanted to open up that first segment just running through the games, running through the quick storylines, just, those quick hitters that you see when you first talk about a game, when you first look at a game. Now I want to broaden the spectrum here. Now I wanted to dive in deeper, not just to these games, but everything going on in the NFL. Look, we've got a lot going on right now. All of the teams that have fired their coaches and GMs. What's the best job out there? If you're a head coach, if you're a GM, I'm talking to you. Hit me up on Twitter at GSMC_football. What is the best job? What is the best GM out there? Which one would you pick? Who would you pick if you're a head coach? Which franchise are you going to go coach? We'll dive into that. Also, Deahaun Watson reportedly might want out of Houston. Why is this? And if so, should almost every team out there pretty much be going after him? And then, of course, we're going to dive into these games. I'm going to give you my picks. So much more going on here. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Welcome to Wild Card Weekend. Hope everyone's going to be able to sit back and watch the games. 6 total games this weekend. It is going to be one to remember, that's for sure. A lot of different scenarios, really a lot of different ways to go here if you look at the games too. I mean, I can see a lot of upsets. Again, I fully think that the Colts, if they bring their A game, they can beat the Bills. I know that's shocking to say because the Bills have been so hot lately, but we have to take a step back sometimes when we're looking at these teams in terms of the regular season and in terms of the playoffs. It's a whole different ballgame. I'm going to keep stressing that over and over throughout the show because it really is. Josh Allen, while he's been a fantastic quarterback this year, an MVP level quarterback, he should finish top 2 or top 3 in the actual MVP votes. I believe Aaron Rodgers should actually win the award, but Josh Allen should be up there on the podium. There's no doubt about that. Again, though, this is the playoffs, and this will be his second ever playoff start. Things get tighter in the playoffs. The games go different ways in the playoffs. Defense is more important. Phillip Rivers, while he hasn't had a bunch of playoff success, he has had a good amount. He is a veteran when it comes to that. Frank Wright, a little bit more aware of how to coach in the playoffs. You remember, he was on that staff. He was the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia team that made that run to beat New England in the Super Bowl. So while I think the Bills should win the game, I would not be shocked one bit if the Colts did. And that's kind of my whole point behind all of this. The Rams, even if Jared Goff doesn't play and John Wolford goes out there, I still think the Rams have a really big opportunity here where they could upset this Seattle Seahawks team. Because, again, their defense is really good and their running game is good. And Sean McVay is a great coach, and their defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, is a great coach. They have all the makings to win a playoff game. They have all the makings to make a playoff run. Now, I don't know how far they'll be able to go without Jared Goff, but if you're telling me to win one game and I can take the team with the better defense, 99% of the time, I'm taking that team in the playoffs with the better defense. Regular season, give me offense all day. The field just shrinks a little bit during the playoffs. It gets tighter. Points are harder to come by. You need to make less mistakes. The team that usually makes the less mistakes, the team that wins the turnover battle, the team that has better defense, plays better defense, so most of the time ends up winning the game. So I wouldn't be surprised. And then when it comes to that night game, look, the Buccaneers, while they've been hot as of late, it's a little fool's gold, all right? Tom Brady and this offense has been rolling, but these last 4 weeks, they've beaten the Falcons twice, and they've beaten the Detroit Lions. So, yes, they put up points like crazy, but they've beaten some teams with some pretty bad defenses, right? So when you look at the Bucs team, again, Mike Evans, he's expected to play, but he had a pretty nasty knee injury. Luckily for the Bucs and luckily for him, it wasn't anything too severe, and it looks like he's going to be able to go, but it's still going to be a little worrisome. How is he 100%? Can he really plant that foot good enough and take off? These are all things we're going to have to watch when it comes to these games, but at the end of the day, every single one, especially in terms of just looking at the spread, the Colts +7, I think that this game easily could be within a touchdown. They could cover that. The Washington football team +8, +9, I think they could easily cover that because they have a really good defense. Now, the problem with Washington is Alex Smith is banged up and their offense is already pretty bad to begin with. If Alex Smith can't be 100% out there, I just don't see any possibility that Washington wins this game. Because of their defense being so good, I think that they could stay close and that they could be in the game for the most part, but they're not going to generate enough offense without Alex Smith to upset the Bucs, if that makes sense. They can keep it close. They can get some turnovers. That defense can sack Brady, make him uncomfortable, put them in bad field goal position or field position to start off their drives, but make them settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. All of that stuff will keep them in the game, but they won't actually have a chance to win it unless they can put up some points on their own, and they're not going to be able to do that unless that they can get Alex Smith out there, and hopefully a healthy Alex Smith, because banged up Alex Smith doesn't really do much for them anyway. So that's a little thing about these three games. Now, I want to go away from the playoffs for a second and look more into just a couple of storylines that's going on around the league. We'll dive right back into these playoff games. I know this is a big Saturday, but there's a lot going on in the NFL right now. We need to take a step back because there's one storyline that it's bothering me, and I want to talk about it. It's been talked about heavily right now, all around sports radio, all around sports TV, and I want to hit on it. And look, that's Deahaun Watson. Everyone knows the Houston Texans, they had a bad year, but Deahaun Watson did not. Deahaun Watson is one of 2 quarterbacks ever to complete 70% of his passes for more than 8 yards a pass in the NFL history. There's only 2 QBs ever to do that. One was Joe Montana, and the second was Deahaun Watson. What was that again? Deahaun Watson completed 70% of his passes at a clip of 8.5 yards per pass, right? So he was throwing the ball downfield. Only Joe Montana has done that other than Deahaun Watson. That's an incredible mark right there. But for him to play that well, and they still went 4-12. Why? Because of what's happened with this organization. It's dysfunctional. They let a head coach, Bill O'Brien, make general manager moves. That should never happen. There's only a finite amount of people that can actually be a coach and a GM. It's really hard to be both. You're either a coach or you're a GM. Okay? It's 2 completely different jobs, and sometimes these coaches think they can do both. And when owners believe that and they let these coaches do it, it usually ends up bad. And that's what happened when they gave Bill O'Brien the power. And he has completely destroyed this team. And that's why they fired him. But now they're in a situation where they have one of the best assets in the league in Deahaun Watson. They have one of the best young quarterbacks in the league in Deahaun Watson. And he's not very happy with them. And nor should he be. And again, the Texans, he had a fantastic year, but the Texans had a down year. And in most cases, you can say, well, guess what? It's okay because you have your quarterback for the future. You had a bad year, which means you're going to get a really high draft pick, and you can now start to bring some pieces in to help that quarterback. Well, unfortunately for the Texans, they don't have that high draft pick. That number 3 overall draft pick is going, you're right, to Miami Dolphins. Why? Because Bill O'Brien traded 2 first-round picks to get in left tackle Laramie Tunsil. Now, I fully agree with bringing in a left tackle because Deahaun Watson was running around for his life, getting sacked over and over, all that stuff. He needed protection. But when you go out and you trade and get 2 first-round picks for a left tackle, usually you try and find ways to bring picks in other places, or you don't get rid of other picks. Bill O'Brien was not able to do that. So they had a terrible season, and now they're giving away their number 3 overall pick to Miami because of that move by Bill O'Brien. So it puts us in a spot where Deahaun Watson's clearly not happy. And look, Deahaun Watson, he's not asking to get out as of yet, but he wants his voice to be respected. What's so wrong with that? What is so wrong with that? Right now, that's up in the air if he's actually going to get that wish from this organization, which is really unfortunate. But here's a couple things first, all right? I want to just go through this because remember, we're talking about a Houston Texans team. The Texans that just a couple of years ago, they had Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, Dwayne Brown, the great left tackle. Like, they had everything that you're kind of looking for to build towards a championship team. And then they also drafted Deahaun Watson. Well, a couple years later, you turn around and they have nothing except Deahaun Watson. They have 0 draft picks, 0 picks in the first or second round this year. 0. They have 0 cap flexibility. Their cap is all tied up in contracts. They don't have a head coach. They don't have a GM. Well, now they do, but on and on and on. Issues all over. So immediately, when people hear that Deahaun Watson has asked for a trade, which has not been corroborated by anybody, but when you hear that he asked for a trade, the response is always, it's, hey, You shut up, you get paid X amount of money, and they just start throwing currency at him, right? Like this dollar figure at him. Currency is the reason that he shouldn't be able to have any say in the organization. You always hear that. This is the leader. This is the face of the organization. He is one of the best players in football. He is by far and away your best player because you don't have any good players. And even if you did have good players, he'd still be your best player. He is the guy that is remarkably charitable in the community, and he's 25 years old. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to want to listen to him and get some input. I mean, doesn't that just sound logical? And remember, I am old enough, and I think most of you are too, to remember Deahaun Watson beating the Buffalo Bills in the wildcard round last year at this time, and then being up 24-0 against the Chiefs in the divisional round before giving up that lead. Like, that was only a year ago from today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm old enough to remember that. So just put that into your mind, how quickly a franchise can change in the NFL if the right moves are not made. And recently, the right moves were nowhere to be found when Bill O'Brien was running this franchise. Now reports are coming out from Adam Schefter and other reputable sources that's exactly what Cal McNair, the owner of the Texans, did. He said, this is what he did. He said, listen, Deahaun, I want your input. He went up to Deahaun, okay? That's what all these Schefter and all these other reputable sources are saying, that Cal McNair, the owner of the Texans, went up to Deahaun Watson and said, I want your input. And Deahaun, while understanding, and this is me paraphrasing from what Schefter and others have reported, by the way, on the Texans situation, Deahaun Watson understanding he's not going to have final say in who gets hired as general manager and who gets hired as head coach, but he was approached by the owner, and the owner insinuated, I'd like your input. Well, here's the problem. Remember when you saw that tweet from Deahaun Watson that said, some things never change? A couple days ago, he sent that out. Well, now we're starting to understand exactly what he meant by some things never change. Like when DeAndre Hopkins was shipped off to Arizona. Nobody even talked to him about it. Nobody even informed him about it. Nobody said, hey, what's your opinion on this, Deahaun? When Cal McNair hired Nick Caserio along with the team chaplain, who apparently is the president, nobody talked to Deahaun Watson about it. Here's the problem. Cal McNair went straight to Deahaun Watson and said, give me some ideas. Cal McNair went to Deahaun Watson. This is out there, guys. This isn't me telling you anything from sources that are mine. This is from Schefter. This is from very reputable people in this industry, insiders in this industry. Okay? Cal McNair, the owner, went up to Deahaun Watson. Deahaun Watson gave Cal McNair and the president some ideas as far as general manager and a coach. And without even discussing, without even talking to the people that Deahaun Watson said, again, this is all being reported by Schefter and others, without even approaching those that Deahaun Watson had insinuated might do a good job, they just went rogue and hired Nick Caserio. Also, at this point, Eric Bieniemy has been interviewed by every job opening except the Houston Texans. So Bieniemy didn't even get an interview with the Texans. And according to reports, Watson was like, well, that's one guy I'd love for you to take a look at. He's helped mold Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, Mahomes and Watson are really good friends. So I'm sure Mahomes told Watson, this is a perfect guy for you guys, because it's been reported that Mahomes has been hyping up Bieniemy as a head coach. Now, that's just speculated that Mahomes told Watson. There's no reporting on that part, but it makes sense because they're really good friends. Bieniemy's obviously a good offensive mind. He has learned from Andy Reid, who is one of the best coaches to ever do it, especially on the offensive side of the ball. That's a guy I'd like you to talk to. That's what Watson said to Cal McNair. That's a guy I'd like you to talk to. They didn't even have a Zoom call with him. A Zoom call, ladies and gentlemen. So think about that. That's the only team with an opening, with a head coach opening, you've got the Chargers, the Jaguars, the Falcons, the Jets. All of these teams need head coaches, and every single one of them interviewed Eric Bieniemy except the Houston Texans. And that was the one person that Watson said, hey, how about give him a look? Again, in the reporting, it was very clear that Watson wasn't under the false pretense that he was going to be selecting the head coach and selecting the general manager. He never was asking for that type of power. So he just wanted to say, he just wanted a voice. And remember, he didn't even ask for that. The owner went up to him to ask for his thoughts. It's just a little bit different when the owner literally walks up to you and says, what do you think? You give them some options and they ignore all your input. Right? But the easy thing to do is say, well, use currency. And this is not just sports talk radio, okay, host. This is sports talk radio callers. This is everybody. We have this insane jealousy that permeates. And so for years and years and decades, all we do is call up and say they're getting paid X amount of money, so they should shut up and play. Because you and I, and I'm including myself in this, aren't making a percentage of what these athletes are making. So we project our insecurities, we project our jealousies onto them and say they don't deserve to have a voice. All of you know what I'm talking about. You hear it all across sports talk radio. You hear it from the host, you hear it from the callers. It's ridiculous. Can't we go a little bit deeper than that? Can't we have a little bit more of a sophisticated conversation than that? Wouldn't you, knowing the character given the character of Deahaun Watson, the intellect and the season he just gave you, playing 16 games, getting sacked 49 times, and still having a career year at 25 years old? He's going to be around for 12 more seasons, plus if he's healthy. Wouldn't you want to include that dude into your organization's future? Wouldn't you want someone of that intellect and that type of skill set to have a little bit of an input? And at the very least, if you were to walk up to him and ask him for that type of input, wouldn't you at the very least talk to the people that he suggested and then go hire the people that you wanted? Like, why disrespect him the way they did? Again, we have to understand here, people. I'm not sitting here, because I can already hear it now, I'm not sitting here saying, give Deahaun Watson final say in everything. You must hire the people he wants. You better or else. I'm not saying that. That would be stupid. Deahaun Watson is a great player, but that's the key right there. He is a player. He isn't a coach. He isn't a GM. Just like how Bill O'Brien was a coach, not a GM. But the Texans made the catastrophic mistake of making him into a GM as well. And that's why they are in this spot in the first place. So I'm not sitting here because I already know what a bunch of you out there are going to say. These players, they just need to play. They shouldn't have power to make decisions, blah, blah, blah. Times have changed. Okay? In 2021, players do have power. But again, Deahaun Watson is not even asking for that type of power. He just wants his voice to be respected. What's so wrong with that? What's so wrong with that? So now a simple tweet, some things never change, is starting to become very clear what Deahaun Watson was intimating. It's a Zoom call. It's a Zoom call. You understand, ladies and gentlemen, now interviews aren't, hey, fly on in, let's have a big dinner over here at Angus Barn. I'll get you some steaks. I'll get you some drinks on me. Let's have some fun. No, it's a Zoom call. You do them. I do them. They're very easy. We do them all the time at work now because of the pandemic. But the Texans couldn't even do that for their 25-year-old superstar. They're in this position because they deserve to be in this position because of the mistakes that they have made. And now because of the disrespect that they're giving towards Deahaun Watson. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, what we're going to do is I'm going to dive a little bit deeper, a couple more minutes on this Deahaun Watson situation, because I just want to go from here into should they now move on from him? Should Deahaun Watson want to be out because of what's happening here? Then we're going to go into which quarterback has the most pressure on them come this weekend. All right? There are a lot of storylines. There are a lot of quarterbacks with narratives, right, on the line. Who has the most to prove? Who has the most pressure on them come 1 o'clock Saturday when all these games start to kick off? We'll dive into it right after this. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Welcome to wildcard weekend, a historic wildcard weekend. 6 games really taking place all throughout the weekend. 3 today, 3 tomorrow on Sunday. Got the Bills and the Colts tipping off, I guess you should say kicking off at 1 o'clock here. See, I'm a big basketball fan, so I'm already in basketball mode. So the tipping off, might throw a court in the mix here. Forgive me, all right? It's hard for me to switch from basketball to football like that. I usually like to just combine them all at once, but this is a football show, so we're strictly staying football here. But a lot to talk about. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic weekend, right? You got 3 games with so many storylines so many narratives, so much pressure on the line. The way we look at it, you got 2 teams, the Green Bay Packers, the Kansas City Chiefs, waiting to see who they're going to play. In my opinion, those were the 2 best teams all season. Yes, the Chiefs have slipped these last couple of weeks. We'll see how they bounce up and get going. They clearly are in the mindset that they can just kind of turn the switch and get things going, kind of like, to talk about basketball here, kind of like LeBron's teams usually do in the playoffs, right? We always see, not always, but especially the last couple years, other than this last year with the Lakers, LeBron's teams usually kind of limp into the playoffs. They're not playing the best defense. Their offense isn't going the best. And then it's like, can they turn it on? And usually they turn that switch and it goes. The Chiefs are kind of going with that mindset now because they've already won a ring. They're champions. They feel like they can do that. And they really haven't given us any example of why they can't or any reason to not believe that they can't do that. But it's harder to do that in football. All right. In basketball, it's really there's more emphasis on that one player. So in other words, if LeBron turns it on, the Lakers are most likely going to win, or the Cavs back in the day, the Heat back in the day, they're most likely going to win. Now in the playoffs, he needs his help. He needs role players, but it's more easy to pick up a team with one player than in football because you have 11 players on both sides, 11 on defense, 11 on offense. Like it's harder to just flip the switch because even if Patrick Mahomes flips the switch, Who says the offensive line flips the switch? Who says the defensive line? Who says the safeties, the quarterbacks? It's just a different atmosphere. It's a different game. It's more of a team sport. It's the ultimate team sport, we like to say. So, but still, they're so stacked. They're so well coached. A lot of us believe that they can flip that switch. But it's going to be 3 weeks until that Patrick Mahomes hasn't played football because they rested him last week, right? So then he's not going to play this week, and then he'll play next week. So it's going to be a good 2-3 weeks of him not actually really out there playing in a real game scenario. Is that going to affect him? That's one thing. Then you have the Packers, who have just come flying into the postseason. They are just dominating teams left and right. They're playing great football. The defense is playing better. The defense is doing much better this year than it was last year. You remember, last year the Packers were 13-3, but it felt like a false team. It felt like a false record. When you saw that 13-3, it was like something about them just seems off. And they were still able to make it to the NFC Championship game, where they then got steamboat by the 49ers. Why did they get steamboat? Because of their defense that wasn't able to stop the run. I think Jimmy G threw like 9 total passes in that game, and they just ran all over the Packers. That has changed. If you look at these last couple of games, they've stopped. That defense has shut down 2 of the best running backs, 2 of the hottest running backs in the league. In Derrick Henry, they held him to under 100 yards, and then in David Montgomery. So the defense has picked things up. And that's why I feel different about the Packers this year, because it just feels like Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers are on an all-time level of connectivity right now. They are really connecting at a high level. You can tell they both are thinking the same thing. LaFleur has understood and really got to know how Rodgers likes to really call his own plays and change things up at the line of scrimmage, while Rodgers has started to understand what LaFleur likes to do. He's executing his scheme at a very high level, and then the defense is playing phenomenal. So right now, I think the Packers are the best team in the league right now. But the Bills are on fire. The Bills are very hot. We know that. And there's a lot of the Ravens. The Ravens might be one of the hottest teams in the league. They've won 5 straight. Yes, it was against lower competition, but they've still won 5 straight, and they've done it in dominating fashion. So there's a lot out there, and a lot of upsets can happen, which is why the NFL playoffs are so fun. You think there's one team out there that can win it all. Next thing you know, the Bears upset the Saints. Now, I don't see that happening, but I will tell you one thing about the Saints. Drew Brees has not performed very well the last couple of years in the playoffs. Now, the Saints team has been riding on their defense. So it's going to go as far as their defense can take them. Yes, they have Alvin Kamara, but if you stop Kamara, you kind of stop this Saints offense. That's kind of the case. They don't have much more weapons. Michael Thomas has been banged up all season. If you stop Kamara, you stop the offense. The question is, can you score enough on this defense? I don't think Mitch Trubisky will be able to get it done, but moving on to the next round, if they line up against a team like Tampa Bay, if they line up against a team like, Seattle, I think it's going to be tough for them to go offense to offense with a team like that, right? Like trade points with a team like that, because I just don't think their offense is electric enough to go head to head with a team like a Buccaneers right now or a Packers. Now, the one matchup that I think would be really interesting would be a Rams Saints matchup. We both know the history between those two teams. Now, we're getting ahead of ourselves, so we'll have to see. Obviously, the Rams have to have a very tough task, a very uphill climb beating the Seahawks in Seattle, and then the Saints, they still have to beat the Bears, which it's not, look, yes, it's the Bears, they slipped into the playoffs. That's still not a team where you can just lay down and win. They're still going to have to bring their A game to get that done. So that's something we'll have to pay attention to as we move forward here. Now, I want to finish up really quickly on our conversation of Deahaun Watson, right? Because where we were at, Deahaun Watson, he's frustrated with the organization. owner of the Houston Texans, Cal McNair. This is reported by Schefter and reputable others that really know what they're talking about, that have their hands in a lot of these organizations and have a lot of sources in these organizations. Cal McNair. It's not like Deahaun Watson went up to Cal McNair and said, "Hey man, I want some power in this decision-making process. I want you to come to me." No, Cal McNair went up to Deahaun Watson and he said, "Hey, I want you to help us out. Who do you want us to interview? Well, what are your thoughts on that?" And Deahaun Watson gave him his thoughts. And they just completely went and did the opposite of it. They disrespected him. They didn't even give the one guy who he said, Eric Bieniemy, a Zoom call. They didn't even give him a Zoom call, all right? They didn't do that. So now we start to understand what Deahaun Watson meant when he tweeted out, "Some things never change." It's starting to become very clear what Deahaun Watson was intimating. It's a Zoom call. You understand now interviews aren't, "Hey, fly in, let's have a big dinner," as I said earlier, right? As I said in this segment, in the last segment. They weren't willing to do a frickin' Zoom call. So let's recap as far as the Texans, all right? With a 25-year-old superstar quarterback, what's happened over the last little bit? The Houston Texans and owner Cal McNair let Bill O'Brien burn the organization to the ground on the way out. They let him mortgage the future, trade away a top 3 wide receiver in the game and a Hall of Famer as a 27, 28-year-old DeAndre Hopkins. They let him trade away all of the equity when it comes to draft picks. They then decided to shut down communication and disrespect their one, and I'm talking one and only asset moving forward in Deahaun Watson, acting like they cared about his input and then ultimately ignoring it. And we say, well, you're making this much money, shut up. Let's have the currency conversation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we just cut it right there, what's left to be discussed? If every conversation in this industry starts and ends with these guys get paid X amount of money, they don't deserve to have opinions, then what's the point? Of course he deserves to have an opinion. You'd be foolish not to have an opinion. You'd be foolish not to want his opinion, not to want his input, get his input. Well, thank you for that, Deahaun Watson. Eric Bieniemy, we talked to him. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But do you have anybody else that you'd like us to take a look at? Anyone else that you might want to work with? Okay, well, Deahaun, we might not hire that exact person, you say, but we're going to try and get an idea of where you're going with that. We're going to give him an interview. Instead, they don't even talk to Bieniemy. And from what's being reported, literally every single other opening, those other teams that have an opening, interviewed Bieniemy. Every single one of them. Now, Bieniemy has interviewed a million times in the past. He may not get a job. And if he doesn't get a job, it may be because he just might be bad at interviews. Okay? I mean, there's a serious report out there that Eric Bieniemy completely bombed the Falcons interview. And I've heard this before about Bieniemy, okay? So, and I'm not all into that camp of that you have to hire Bieniemy just because he's been calling good plays for a while. I've always been a little bit worried about Bieniemy because I just don't know, and it's not specifically on Bieniemy, it's just I don't know how much of the Chiefs' success is Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and those great weapons, and how much of it is Eric Bieniemy. Now, clearly, Eric Bieniemy is an extremely smart guy. He's an extremely smart offensive mind, and he's probably learned, or he definitely has learned so much in his years of coaching and lots of experience. But that's the tricky part with interviewing guys or bringing on guys that are with such great teams and such great coaches. You just don't know how much is him and how much is Andy Reid. And then wherever he goes, he's not going to have nearly as much talent as the Chiefs had. You know, I hope for his sake he gets an opportunity because he does deserve one. But at the very least, the Texans are going to talk to this guy, right? At the very least. Specifically, when your franchise guy that you just gave $150 million to extend, specifically when he says, hey, that's a guy you want to talk to, And when every other team is talking to him, it might make some sense to talk to him as well, right? And again, it's not like Cal McNair, the owner of the Texans, came to Watson to ask his thoughts. It's not like Watson was like, oh yeah, I'd really like you guys to give Adam Gase an interview. Or I think Jeff Fisher would be a great hire for this team. No, he gave a name that is extremely hot around the league right now. A guy who has had a bunch of success under Andy Reid in Kansas City. And again, the whole Bieniemy thing specifically on if he will get a job or not, that's a different story. He really might not. He really might just be really bad at interviewing. But to be the only team that doesn't interview him, whether Watson told you to or not, if you're a smart organization, you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to interview the popular choice. You're going to interview the hot candidates. That's just called being smart, guys, right? Checking off all the boxes. The Atlanta Falcons, they've interviewed probably about 20 names this week because they're doing their due diligence. They're checking off all the boxes. That's what a smart organization does. That's before the fact that your star franchise QB asked you to do it. Then on top of all that, you got to interview the guy. At the very least, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. And it's just, it's why the Texans are in this situation now. And it's why Deahaun Watson possibly wants out. Now, again, there is no fact that, it's being reported by Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk that he does want to trade, but that's not for sure yet. I have not seen Schefter or anyone, and Mike Florio does a great job. I just haven't seen anyone say that is the exact case, like he has for sure said he wants. It's more of he's thinking about it because he's very upset. This could just be a power move by Deahaun to say, look, I mean business now. You guys come up to me and you ask me my opinion and I tell it to you, and then you don't even interview the guy, and then you completely disrespect me and just hire someone else right away. Don't even do your due diligence of reaching out to the people that I said. That could be Deshaun Watson saying, you know what, you guys clearly don't respect me, and the only way to get your respect is by pulling this move. And I mean business. And then from now on, maybe the Texans take this more serious. I mean, the fact that he even has to do this to get the Texans' attention is flat out unfortunate. The fact that he even has to pull something like this because a normal owner, a normal organization would say, yeah, of course, that's why we came to you. We got your opinion. We're definitely going to interview this guy. Again, no one is saying to hire them. Deshaun Watson's not saying, you better hire this guy or that's it. No one's going to say that. He's not even telling you guys that. Because he's a player. He's a superstar player. He's a great player. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But he doesn't have that, nor should he have that type of power. Because say he goes up and says, hire this guy. That's the guy I want. And you better hire him. And then they do hire him. All right? And then Deshaun Watson's not this kind of person, but say this does happen. Then they're down on the sidelines, they hire the guy Deshaun wants, and say Deshaun and that coach get into it. They get into an argument. I mean, Deshaun could turn around and say, hey, man, you're only here because I picked you to be here. All right? That right there, it starts off with him having leverage over that coach. Now, Deshaun Watson, again, he is not going to ever do that. He's not this type of person. And he's not asking for that type of power. That he's just saying, hey, you guys came to me. I gave you my opinions. Now respect them. Don't come to me and ask me what I want if you're not going to respect my opinions. And that's fair. And that's completely fair. And all this nonsense of you make this amount of money, so just shut up and be happy because all these people out in the world would give anything to make that money. Just stop. That should never be a part of this conversation. Yes, they make a lot of money. That's what they do. Get over it, okay? Just because he makes this amount of money, X amount of money, does not mean that he shouldn't have a say and he shouldn't have to feel respected by his organization. He's earned that respect and he's earned that money. And if he's not happy with the way the Texans are running things, then so be it. And I'll tell you what, if he really isn't happy, which he should not be happy right now, and if he really does want out, 25 out of the 32 organizations should come running to get Deahaun Watson because he is a superstar game changer, and there is no doubt about that. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, segment number 4, quarter number 4, we're going to end it out with which quarterback has the most pressure as this weekend gets ready to kick off. There I go again with the basketball talk, kick off. And then we'll give you our picks. We'll give you our game takes. We'll break it all down. We're going to finish this show strong, baby. Wild Card Weekend, GSMC Football Podcast. I'll be right back after this. Thank you. Bye.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome. Quarter number 4, segment number 4. Throw up the 4 fingers as we round out the last segment before Wild Card Weekend, ladies and gentlemen. It is finally here. We've made it. It's tremendous. I can't believe we're actually talking about playoff football. 6 months ago, to think we'd be here, it was really, really hard to actually think that would happen. So the fact that we're here makes me so happy, makes me so excited, and we've got some fantastic games. I mean, really, every single game has the chance to be a good one. It really does. Now, the funny thing is, I actually think all of these games have a really good chance of being a low-scoring game. There's just so many good defense involved in these playoffs, which, of course, that's why they're in the playoffs in the first place, right? The Seahawks, their defense was abysmal to start the season. As of late, they've been way better on the defensive side of the football. That Carlos Dunlap trade has done wonders for their for their pass rushing abilities. Because remember, they couldn't get a pass rush at all going on then. The Rams, their defense is the best in the league. The Bucs defense started out really hot, not so great at the end, but they've got some pass rushers, JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh. They've got Shaquille Barrett. They've got some guys that can really turn on the switch, and they've got a great defensive coordinator in Todd Bowles that can get that team going. Washington, one of the best teams in the league, one of the best defenses in the league, obviously. They're there. The Ravens, they have a great defense in terms of how they can stop the run, which they're playing a very good team in Tennessee that runs the ball very well. So that's going to be awesome. The Titans defense is terrible. That's flat out terrible. And that's why, to lead into this segment here, which QB has the most pressure? Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Phillip Rivers? Is it Drew Brees? Or is it Tom Brady? Wait a second. You're saying, what? Kayvon, Tom Brady? He's won 6 Super Bowls. You're right. So do we just cross him off? Who has the most pressure as you go into this weekend? Who needs to get a win? All right? Because think about it. you can take this wherever you want. Reach out to me on Twitter. Let me hear your thoughts. This show is going out right away Saturday morning, so tell me your thoughts. I'll respond, of course, as always, and we can see where we agree and where we differ. I think there are a couple different ways you can go here. Which quarterback faces the most pressure? From a media standpoint, you can. That's why I said there's a bunch of different ways you can go here. If you want to look at it from a media standpoint, it's going to be Tom Brady. And I get it. Look, again, Kayvon, what is wrong with you? He has 6 rings. He's gone to 9 Super Bowls. How can Tom Brady have the most pressure? Because they're playing, there's a couple reasons here. One, they're playing a team that is 7-9. Remember, all season, the NFC East was a punchline. Everyone was making fun of that defense, including us on this show numerous times. So making the postseason at 7-9, and now Tom Brady has to go and face them, he is expected to win that game. The only other team this weekend that is expected to win, that is expected to win by the media more than the Bucs are, is the Saints over the Bears, right? Other than that, I really think, in terms of how we look at it, the Bucs are right behind the Saints as the team that is most expected to win. Maybe you can add the Bills in there, but the Bills are playing a much tougher competition. Now, Bruce Arians, who really says a lot of dumb things at times, he finally had the exact perfect response to when asked about playing a sub-500 division winner and the Washington football team. And they're going on the road and all that stuff. Bruce Arians stepped back and finally said the right thing. He said, they're not 7-9. This is a team that is 4-1 under Alex Smith. In fact, which he's right. And in fact, they're actually 5-1 in games that Alex Smith has started. He got hurt in one and wasn't able to finish, but they were still able to find a way to win that game. So they're not a 7-9 team when Alex Smith is the starting quarterback. But in fact, it's still, to me and to the media, Brady is still supposed to win that football game, right? Brady is still supposed to beat the Washington football team. With as much talent as they have on offense, even with Mike Evans banged up, they should win this game. And so if Tom Brady, who historically, remember this, historically has not played well in wildcard games, and the reason the Patriots were always getting to the AFC Championship game and ultimately getting to 9 Super Bowls was because they always had the bye week. They were always the best team or one of the top 2 teams in the AFC. Remember, Tom Brady has never made the Super Bowl if having to play wild card weekend. So all those 9 times they made the Super Bowl in New England, he had a bye. He never had to play wild card weekend. So now he's playing in a wild card game, and he hasn't acquitted himself well in wild card games, right? He's playing a 7-9 football team, a team everyone thinks that they should beat no matter what. He's got all the weapons in the world. He arguably has the most talented offense out of every team in the playoffs other than Kansas City. Right? So when you put all that together, Tom Brady has to win this game, in my opinion. And I think the media is going to be all over that. What can Tom do with Bruce Arians' offense in this Tampa Bay team that is really complete? Now, that's just my first punch. Debates, ladies and gentlemen, are like boxing, okay? You have to be able to stand numerous hits coming your way, and you have to be able to give numerous punches back. So that's just my opening round punch, all right? I wasn't looking to knock you out in that first take. Now let me go to this now, all right? Because we have to then define, what does pressure mean exactly? So I think pressure is one of those words that we overuse, right? It's kind of like the word great. We overuse the word great. We overuse the word pressure. So we have to define pressure. None of these guys have real pressure, obviously, because real pressure is living paycheck to paycheck, right? Real pressure is not having a job and trying to find where your next meal is coming from. That's real life pressure. You're playing to survive. I always put it like this. In sports world, in sports terms, pressure is not knowing if you're going to have a job next year on that same team, not knowing if you're going to get a contract next year. You're playing to make sure that you will have a job next year. That's real pressure, all right? Tom Brady, even if he goes out there and throws for 4 interceptions and 200 yards and they lose the game, as long as Tom Brady wants to play next year, he's going to be the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Bucs week 1. So it's not like he's going to lose his job if he plays bad. All right? So, that I'm not trying to get deep, but that's real pressure, right? And sometimes I love to point out that distinction just because it's something we got to think about. So he doesn't have that type of pressure to worry about. So what is my definition of pressure for sports moments like this? See, pressure to me is 2 things. One, it's going into a game with a narrative out there about you. And you either are able to play so well in that game or so poorly to the point where you either change the narrative or you make it worse. Or 2, it affects your earning power. Now, in most cases, many would say, well, that doesn't affect Tom Brady then. Because no matter what, Tom Brady is widely known as the GOAT. And that's correct. In my opinion, he's the best quarterback ever. I said it 100 times. Ever since I watched him come back from 28-3 on my Falcons, I've said that is the greatest quarterback of my lifetime. But there's a different scenario here, and that's the Bill Belichick factor. Tom Brady has not won a playoff game without Bill Belichick as his coach. So Tom Brady now has the chance today to squash that narrative. He has the chance today to do something that he's never done before. He has a chance to uplift his legacy and put pressure on Belichick next year, right? So that's why I believe so much is on the line for Tom Brady. It's not like he's going out there and playing a 14-2 Packers team, or he's going out there and playing the Kansas City Chiefs, or he's already won 1 playoff game. If he wins this playoff game, I might not pick Tom Brady next week as the QB with most pressure on him, right? Because it changes everything. He can say he officially won a playoff game. He officially took a team 11-5 and then went to the playoffs and won a playoff game without Bill Belichick. And that's way more than Bill Belichick can say without Tom Brady. So he's uplifting his legacy and he's putting more pressure on Belichick to have to succeed next year. Because we all know how things went in New England this year. It was a disaster. The offense was bad. The defense was bad. Now they had a lot of opt-outs. They had a lot going on. So obviously this is Brady's time to get up and up because he has more of an advantage, right? I mean, look, if Brady comes out there today and throws for 200 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and they lose the game, are we going to say, well, see, he actually isn't the greatest of all time anymore? No, we're not going to do that most likely. But what is going to happen is we're going to always have to put Belichick's name with Brady when discussing Brady. We aren't going to be able to separate the two. Brady has a chance today to do that. Brady has a chance to separate himself in that conversation. He has that opportunity. That's why I say he has the most pressure as a QB going into today, going into wildcard weekend. And I think the media would agree with that. Now, to me, let's look at some of the other QBs that might also have some pressure on them as well, okay? To me, Josh Allen doesn't have pressure on him today. To me, Josh Allen has the ability to go out there and play free. Now, even if he really stunk it up and played a terrible game, there would be people out there that would, already go to, he can't win in big moments and stuff like that, but it would be premature. It would be too early, all right? He has already made a huge jump in his play. Remember, 50% completion coming out of college, right? Every single year since, he has upgraded that completion percentage. Every single year he has gotten better to the point this year where he is in the MVP conversation. Last year, he takes the team to the playoffs. In his first ever playoff game, he lost by 1 point to Deahaun Watson. So this is his second ever playoff game, right? So I think he still, in my opinion, he still has time before we can start to place pressure on him when it comes to needing a win, needing to win a playoff game. Now, the other guy who is up there with pressure is Lamar Jackson. Because when you get to the point, now Lamar Jackson would still be, think about it, Lamar Jackson would still be the quarterback in the future for the Ravens. All right, that's not going to change if he goes out and loses to the Titans on Sunday. But think about how I framed my definition of pressure. One, it adversely impacts your earning power, or two, it changes a specific narrative. That definition fits both of those for Lamar Jackson. Now, the reason I did not put Lamar number one is because he is still so young and the sample size is still small. But if he loses on Sunday, it will start to grow. 0-2 is one thing. Starting your career 0-3 in the playoffs, that's a little different, right? That's going to take a big playoff run for you to get yourself back to 500 or above 500 with your win-loss record in the playoffs. You don't want to do that. And if he bombs again in the playoffs, and he has had some duds, let's be honest. First one was understandable. He was a rookie. They played the Chargers. He actually only played half that season. He came in and really brought a spark to that team. They went on like a 7-game win streak, one to get into the playoffs. That was understandable. Then last year, they were the number one team in the league, and Lamar didn't play well at all. He really had a dud. And that's what now brings us to this year. So if he is now 0-3, this is his narrative. This will be his narrative if he goes 0-3, all right? This is his story until it's changed otherwise. And it could, and I would submit it very well might determine what kind of money he gets from the Ravens moving forward. The Ravens have been one of the best teams in football over the last 2 years. And he's been one of the best quarterbacks in football over those last 2 years. He's different than what we're used to seeing at quarterback, right? But he has been one of the best quarterbacks in football. You don't win an MVP otherwise. But in the postseason, whether it's pressure or you're playing a better team and they game plan you out of what you do best, he does have some pressure for sure. The one thing I will say about Lamar Jackson, which to me is very admirable, I don't think Lamar Jackson feels the pressure. And again, this has nothing to do with the question. Like, that doesn't mean the pressure is off of him. He just is someone that doesn't seem like he cares. He seems like he can put it out of his mind very quickly. I think Tom feels the pressure. And I think Tom knows that this is huge. I think Tom understands he needs to win without Belichick. Tom spent the last couple of years, even a year in New England, like rebuilding, or not rebuilding because he's always had this great brand, but kind of changing his brand a little bit. Like he's become more like cheesy and quirky, and he's doing things on social media and stuff like that. So I think he feels the pressure, like there's an urgency to be successful now. He's probably had that urgency, but I think, when he was in New England, it was like, okay, if we falter, well, we've already won 5 of these rings, so it's okay. You know what I mean? It's like we already have some equity here in New England. We've already made our stamp. I don't think that's the case in Tampa. So I just think that Tom feels it more than Lamar does. At this point, Lamar's only 24 years old. He still has time to even process what winning is and how important it is and all that stuff. He still has time. Now, again, I do think he's starting to get a sense of maybe it's winning time, but it's not fully there yet, right? Because, let me ask you this question. Do you think Tom Brady pays attention to the Brady versus Belichick debate? You better believe he does. You know he does. And him getting a win really pushes him forward in that debate. And I think that's why it's so big. Now, the thing about Lamar, and the reason why things are so interesting with Lamar, is Lamar is a different quarterback. He's a different quarterback, right? He's not the same type of quarterback as your everyday drop back, 5 steps, 7 steps, throw the ball. He's a runner. And coming into the NFL, he was questioned. Not everyone, but lots of people said that he's a running back. He shouldn't be a quarterback. So he already has that narrative that he's dealing with. And the thing about that is that means defenses can game plan him, right? And if you start to see defenses start to take away his running strength and make him throw the ball, that's why his narrative will grow so much. Now, if he goes out there on Sunday and he lights that Titans defense up, which is a very bad defense, and he should, and he throws for 300 yards and they lose the game, that changes everything. Why? Because he balled out. He balled out in the way where a normal quarterback, quote unquote normal, because let's be real, that's just the way we put it these days, and always have with the normal as in the step back, drop back quarterback. He's more of a Swiss Army run type of guy. If he can go out there, though, and show he can sling the ball, throws for 300 yards, a couple touchdowns, and they lose, that's fine. That's fine. That should not put a mark on him. Now, if he goes out there, though, and runs for 150 yards and only throws for 100 and they lose, that's a problem, because it's going to go back to, yeah, he's a great running quarterback, but he can't throw the ball. And that's where things are going to have to change. He's got to be able to show that he can win the game. If he goes out there and doesn't throw well, but they win, whatever, they won, it's fine. But because he's a running quarterback and because there's just it's starting to change that way in the NFL, but it's still not the norm, right? When we look at Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, it's usually those traditional drop back passers. So we're looking for ways to see Lamar's type of quarterback, that type of athletic quarterback can't do it. We're going to see if he can change that debate, if he can change that narrative. And I cannot wait to see what happens. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. As we head into this final couple minutes here, just want to give you guys thought process of where we're at with all of going on. The games, my final picks here, I think Buffalo wins, but wins by a small margin. I like the Colts +7, but I think Buffalo ends up winning that game. All right, I like the Rams to upset the Seahawks. Let me get the Rams to upset the Seahawks. Definitely taking the Rams +3, and I think that I might even sprinkle a little bit on the money line for them to win. I think the Buccaneers beat Washington in a low-scoring game. I like Lamar to finally get over the hump and beat the Titans. I think the Saints beat the Bears, and I think the Steelers beat the Browns. So those are my picks right there. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend watching football. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great weekend watching football. We'll be back on.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.